Welcome back to the Common Denominator. I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel. We turn today to look at the blaring headlines surrounding the election results in France and also in the UK, divisions made, and surprise outcomes that parallel many of the same challenges the US faces. And Israel is no less a central topic in the deliberations. We've heard the alarming call from Paris's chief rabbi telling Jews in France to flee, for the young to leave for Israel because they have no future in the exponentially growing anti-Jewish environment, and little to no protection from the entities that have and would again attack that community. Nor are they permitted entry into the many roles in human rights, NGOs, and culture and arts that they once filled. We have long attempted to convey that the fate of the Jews translates directly to the fate of Western civilization as a whole, and we see this come to life in no clearer representation than in France today. Here to talk with us about these topics is expert analyst Rabbi Dr. Dov Maimon. Dr. Maimon is a senior fellow at JPPI, the Jewish People Policy Institute, which is an independent professional policy planning think tank in Jerusalem. Dr. Maimon leads the Grand Strategy Toward Islam Project, the Israel Diaspora New Paradigm Project, and the Institute's activities in Europe. Among his action-oriented work, he's a member of the Advisory Committee for Improving Access to Ultra-Orthodox to Higher Education, chaired by Professor Manuel Trachtenberg. He's also the author of the Action Plan for Bringing the Developing Mass Migration of French Jews to Israel. Commissioned by governmental agencies, this plan was adopted by the Israeli cabinet on June 22, 2014. Dr. Maimon was born in Paris. He earned a BS from the Technion in Haifa, an MBA from INSEAD in Fontainebleau, France, and an MA in religious anthropology and a PhD in Islamic and medieval studies from the Sorbonne. He's a laureate of a prestigious prize awarded to the best French PhD work in literature and human sciences. He's also a graduate of the Mandel School of Educational Leadership. He's formerly a high-tech industry entrepreneur. And Dr. Dov also teaches at the School of Business Administration in Ben-Gurion University. Rabbi Dr. Dov Maimon, it is our great pleasure to welcome you here today.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of your Common Denominator podcast.
Thank you. So just like the smallest opening, let's remember Theodor Herzl, one of the founders of modern secular Zionist movement. He had his awakening to the Jewish problem as a Paris correspondent covering the trial of Alfred Dreyfus. Dreyfus, of course, was an officer in the French army. He was framed and then convicted for treason. On the 5th of January in 1895, Dreyfus was subjected to the humiliation of a degradation ceremony where his badges, stripes, and sleeves of his jacket were torn off, and he was paraded through the streets of Paris as crowds shouted, "Death to Judas, death to the Jew." This event had a profound effect on Herzl, and although completely secular, the spectacle of hatred convinced him of the urgent need for a Jewish state. Here we are 130 years later. France, the country of liberty and fraternity, has seen the highest increase in recorded anti-Semitic incidences of any country with reliable statistics. Rav Maimon, what is happening in France? How has the country changed or stayed on its snowballing disastrous track? Please set the environment for us that has led to today's elections results.
Yes, so the first thing to understand is about the sociology, what's happening in France. We have a polarization because of globalization, and we have an increased social gap all over the world. So we have two parts of France. And we have about something like 80% of the population who are left behind of the globalization. And this population, we are left behind. We have two populations in that. We can separate them in two groups. We have the French, native French people who live in small areas, in the rural areas. And these people, they are on the far right. They just want to be, they feel insecurity at free level. at the level of personal security, because there is a lot of, mainly for Muslim people who make a lot of delinquency, some people who have a lot of violence and so on, personal security, and then economic security because they have a downgrading of our situation because of a globalization. And then there is also cultural and identity security. So they feel that it's not anymore the French. Why? Because we have in France, we have had in France a mass migration from Muslim countries. We think that we have about today 22% of all the new babies in France have an Arabic Muslim name. And so it's about 1/3 of all the babies in France have come from Muslim countries in some way. So it's a lot of people, and this changing the field. So this mass migration was not integrated socially and culturally. So these people live a kind of separatism. Among the Muslim, we have 88%, according to the FBI, the French FBI, according to all the studies that they made, 28% of the Muslims want separatism. They want Sharia for Europe. They want France to be a Muslim country. It's part of the jihad, and the jihad has two main strategies. One is soft power and hard power. Hard power is like jihad with violence, and the other one is to entering every position. And this is what we have, and what they made together is what is doing. So this mass migration of people want France to be more multi-ethnic, multicultural country. They want that the month of Ramadan will be a month of festival in France. They want France to be not only Christmas and Easter, but also to have Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Fitr. They want France to be not anymore the French, but to be also a multicultural French Muslim country. And this is what's population, and they join with the far left. The far left, we call it in France Islamo-leftists. They go together because they have the same goal to destabilize the liberal democratic order. And so we have two forces, and the Jews in that are in bad situation because they are in some way, on one side there is the far right who has some history about the Nazism and collaboration with the Germans and so on the past Second World War. And the other side, they have the Muslims who are very strong people. So the Jews, in this situation of the rise of extremism, they are not in so bad shape. And we don't expect that in the future it will be better. So we don't see no rosy scenario for the Jews. This is what happened with the chief rabbi of a big synagogue who said that there is no future. But the chief rabbi of France, Chaim Korshia, said, no, we have to trust France. We are first national French of Moses religion. And he doesn't accept this vision like the Jew has to live. And most of the Jews in France don't think they want to live. They don't want to live because it's difficult to live. And second, because they feel French citizens and they want to fight to get back to the Republic and to the democracy to protect them.
Yeah. Well, that's a real question there is, do you flee? At what point do you flee, or do you stay and fight? When I think of Europe, it's impossible to separate it from World War II and the Holocaust. So when someone says flee, you think, okay, that might be well worth considering. But when I think of the United States having similar, of course, much earlier on the timeline with the same challenges, but I think absolutely not stay and fight, and absolutely any place where there's a viable democracy and there's still what to hold on to, fight with everything that you have. Yeah. So I'm happy to hear that at least there are some people who wish to do that. But please.
So when we look at what happened now, we understand the French Jews say, we have no place to go. Where to go? Where you want us to go? To go to Israel, which is a country in war. You go to America, and America is becoming Europe. Where do you want to go? We have no much place. So at least when we're in France, we know the country, we know how to manage and to navigate. When we go abroad, we have to build again everything. We don't have a social network, we don't speak the language, and so on. So for sure, it's people as a lot of resistance to move, and they don't see where to move. It's not so clear for the French Jews. And if you look at the big history, you spoke about Herzl. When Herzl wrote his book, The Heich Neue Land, 90% of the Jews were in Europe. After the Second World War, 35% of the Jews were in Europe. And today there are something like 8% of the Jews are in Europe. So it's changing, the Jews living. So, and we look on big history, like we call meta history. We say that in the 12th century, 90% of the Jews were living under Islam. Today, only 0.5% of the Jews live under Islam. So that means that the Jews are not trees. Jews are, it's a matter of push factors and pull factors, and they move. They move to place when it's better. So the Jews, like every human people, are also a kind of migration. But it's difficult because Judaism has been in France for 2,000 years. We have people in France, we can remain from the 17th century in France already. They know exactly who they are in Alsace, Lorraine especially. And these people say, we are French, we are local French, native French. We have never been in any other country. We are already, and they say, they look at the life like a boy who is on the seaside. And he said, we have a wave of anti-Semitism. When we have a wave of anti-Semitism, we just decrease our head, we go back and we accept the wave and we expect to not be killed in some way and then to return and to rebuild on new basis your life. So they say, for 2,000 years in France, we have seen good kingdom and bad kingdom. We have been good situation, bad situation. Don't forget that France, in Europe, during the Holocaust, 75% of the Jews have been killed. But in France, 75% of the Jews have been saved. So it's a double situation. Most of the Jews in France have been hidden by local French. So native French are not anti-Semitic. It's not a country of anti-Semitism. We have three parts of anti-Semitism. One is the far leftist, not because of the Jews, but because they want to court the Muslim vote, because they want to take over, they want to destroy the liberal order. And we have the far right, which wants something different. They want to go back to nationalism. They want to go back to identity. They want to have a French to the French, France to the French, and they want to have a country which is with identity. And it's not anymore radical far right anyway. It's just a normal right. They want national identity, and it's a kind of a reaction to the Muslim will to conquer Europe. So it's what they say. Just we want to remain what we are. If you want to enter France, we can integrate people at the personal level. We cannot integrate nation. A nation cannot integrate nation. We can integrate individuals. And when you come to France, you have to leave away your personal, your prior identity and to adopt the French identity. And it's not what happened because of critical mass of a Muslim, because of Al Jazeera, which is a kind of, on day-to-day reception of all these messages. And then with October 7th, it was a kind of catalyst. It was a catalyst of all this will to conquer the world. So it's as I say, soft power and hard power. And then we have also other actors. I will mention three actors because it's important also for you in America or everywhere. We have some people who are backing anti-Semitism. I will mention, for example, Iran. Not because they have a lot of empathy for the Palestinian children. And China, they don't have special empathy for the children of Gaza. And Putin is supporting, and we have a report of 400 pages from the French Senate, in French with the Assembly, the second chamber, which means how Putin is supporting the far right and the far left on the same time, just to make the West weaker. It's happened. And then we have Qatar. So I can mention three things. And then we have also all the social network. The social network have algorithms that to make money, you have to make hatred, to have a violence and so on. So even if Elon Musk, as you know, around the neck is bring them home, but he knows that from business, it's very good to have this in Twitter and X. It's better for them to have a lot of violence and it's good for business. So these people do it not because of empathy for the children of Gaza. It's just a matter to instrumentalization of anti-Semitism. And this is the way maybe we can fight anti-Semitism by identifying who are the Iran, the Putin, the Chinese actors who want to support all that, to make the West weaker. So it's the same thing in Israel, it's the same thing in Europe, it's the same thing in America. It's important to understand how it works. Anti-Semitism, for sure, if they make it, it's because it's a good business. People know that with anti-Semitism, it all will work. You cannot do it on on return, we have to choose who is the best client. The best client is the Jews, because you can make all these people together hating the same Jews, the same Israel, and they start with Israel, but it's not. So what we can say about the Islamist people in France, we have this mass of migrants, and this mass of migrants, they don't want to, so much for politics, but they use the Gaza war to make these people going out to the street to support the Islamist recommendation and request for more Islam in the public space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always, I mean, when it comes to using Jews as a method of upheaval and division, it's a brand that has worked for hundreds, if not thousands of years. I mean, even here in Israel, as you well know, for 100 years, they say, oh, the Jews want to take over the Temple Mount, and it's rioting on the streets, even though that's never happened. Nothing ever remotely like that has happened, but the same libel is just a flip a switch. And what's so terrifying, and I'm so happy that you brought up Musk and Twitter and all of these types of social media, because they are so blatantly manipulative. And what I find most hopeful and also most terrifying about the anti-Semitism that we see today is that all in other times it was localized, and here, because everybody's got a phone or two in their pockets, this is a global, what we're facing, what civilization is facing, what the Jews are facing, is global. This is not just happening in France or Israel. It is, everyone's got a say, and the distortion is it's completely unhinged. It's a real hysteria. And I agree that the people who live in Gaza have been pawns for the Arab world for 75 years, right? And now they're pawns, as you just mentioned, to a much larger global picture. What I want to check a couple things that you said. My understanding in France was that in the years around in the 1970s, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, in the 1970s was the first so-called temporary immigration of a large Algerian population, and perhaps from other Muslim countries, into France. And at first it was, again, said to be temporary, and they integrated, and they were not radical in any way, and things went well. And that it was only after the Iranian Revolution, 1979, and by the mid 80s, there was this counter separate group that you mentioned, and that this counterculture became increasingly radical with zero assimilation, and the attacks and the danger was already seen in big cities very early on, but it was hushed. So I feel like this is the birth of this so-called Islamophobia, because they had to cover up the visible, active, evident dangers of what this immigration policy had done to the native population. And so they made it taboo to even discuss it aloud. So far, do I have it more or less accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. You made it very clear, Ilana, and I just make it a bit differently. I put it a bit a different way. We have two ways along history. We have two ways to look at how to manage when you have two divergent populations in the same geographic space. One is the imperial model, which is submission, which is to make with a central power who make the people not to fight one with the other, and to keep them separate and to give them some autonomy, like the Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, China today, Iran, or Russia and other places, but also Hungary and Azerbaijan, for example. These people, we have a strong, or Singapore, we have a strong central power, which is a model with, even if you have different population, and they don't have the same values, they don't have the same project, social project and life project, worldview and so on, we can live together in case we have a central power who make these people avoiding fighting with the other. The other model is the Republican power model. The Republican power means that people, we make some social integration and the cultural integration. People have the same project, life project. It's nation state. This is the model. We have a two model that can work. If we don't have these two models, we have another model which is called Lebanonization. That means we have two different populations. What happened with the French people? They made it in Lebanon in 1942, General de Gaulle, who will in France later. So he made there this kind of confessionalism, consensualism. There are some different groups. We have the Christians, the Jews, the Muslim, the Shiite, and the Sunni. And this makes this population, and they agree about how should be the parliament, how to manage the country with some autonomy to the different things. It works until the 1975, but after it was a civil war. So it could happen in Europe. If we don't have not the Republican model, why we don't have a Republican model? Because it's not acceptable today to ask somebody who come to your country to adopt the local culture. Because it's supposed that you have to suppose that your culture is superior to his culture. If you ask to somebody, if you want to my land, you have to abandon who you are and to adopt that, to make assimilation. It's not so much politically correct to do that today. So because of what we can call relative culturalism, something that there is no culture which is better than the other. So the French people cannot ask the Muslim to change their mind and to change their culture. The second reason, and then we go to post-colonialism and you say you cannot make the people to do that. And then the second reason is because there's a matter of critical mass. As you said, people first came as workers. They've been working in France for 60 years already now. They come, they go back when they go to retreat, when they go to be old people, when they finish with retiring, they go back to Algeria or something like that. But at some point, they say, we cannot live this way. We have to be human, we have to be good. And they ask for family togetherness, to bring their families. But the French people, they have a kind of political myopia. I mean, they didn't do effort to integrate this. They keep it in special neighborhoods. It was at this time they need also a lot of workers because it was before the 70s. It was a lot of, we need some people working, and also the big companies, they wanted to decrease the pressure of social workers. The syndicate. The people in France is very strong people of organization of workers. So because they have pressure on the salaries. So what they do, they bring these foreign workers, it decrease the salary pressure because we have more workers. It's a matter of a business normal model. So they made it and they keep them just in special neighborhood with 80%. When we have 90% of the population is from immigrants, they will never learn French. They will never integrate. So they prefer to live this way. So they live in some suburbs with all the Muslims together, and they live them. And these people are a lot of a resentment. They feel that they have been used. They will never be. It's already the third generation now, and we have something similar in America too, with some black people in this feeling also of resentment and marginalization. So at some point they say we are so much. If we are 15 or 20% of our population, why we are not so much? We don't have space for Islam and for our own idea. We don't. And the last thing is that we cannot sell today to people we cannot sell today to the people from the third world that the liberal order is so good after the Vietnam, after the Holocaust, after the Algerian war. You cannot come to the people who say, yeah, what happened? You cannot make a kind of post-colonialism and to tell the people, we are the light, we are enlightenment, and you are some, you are some kind of very past historicism. You cannot understand nothing, and we are going to teach you how to be good people and so on, because they don't trust you. So all the third world people, they don't accept so much this kind of paternalism. So it cannot work anymore. So there is good reason, but it happened as it happened. But it's a matter of critical mass. When you get too much people, and especially when you cannot make assimilation because you are not allowed politically or culturally to do that. And then we have also this all the time with Al Jazeera and all this culture, and we have all the imam. And as you mentioned, Ilana, the last point, important to understand what happened with the Iranian Revolution. As you said, Iranian Revolution gave a backing to all this Islam movement to take over Europe. It's a kind of a crusade in some way. It's happened already. The crusade was after the Muslim conquer in the 8th century, most of the world, and then the Western world go back against the Islam. And so we have today two scenarios for France. We cannot call, if you take from the Islam world, we can be Islamization or Reconquista. Or submission, it means, that's the book of Michel Houellebecq, the very known book. So it will be Islamization. It's not good for the Jews, because not much Jews want to live in Damascus or in Cairo or in any country, Muslim country, especially if you are a woman or gay or LGBT or whatever. And so people don't want the Jews. It's not good for the Jews to have Islamization of Europe. And on the other side, if we have like a Reconquista, which will be a backlash against Islam, it will be a kind of civil war. And then the Jews will be in between. It's not sure. So in kind of Lebanonization, it will be not good for the Jews. And maybe even if they really believe in France, or they don't believe they want to go anywhere and so on. And maybe, I can tell you that the beginning, from the June 30, which is the starting of a new election we have in France, we have 2,000 people, 2,000 families who have registered at the Jewish Agency in Paris. So 2,000 more. So we expect this year to have 400% increase in Aliyah. And if we make it, if Israel is ready to do some efforts and to increase Aliyah, because I will mention now another thing we didn't talk about it. It's about the Jews in France are not all wealthy. Most of the Jews are not part of these two groups that I mentioned, the left behind of globalization. Most of the Jews belong to the 20% of people who have benefited from globalization, and they work for Republican, they work for democracy, they want democracy, and they don't want to go on the extreme. Jews don't like extreme. Normally, it's not good for a minority. Extremism is very normally bad for minority who are powerless. So the Jews want to be in this thing, but outside of the 400,000 Jews we have in France, and we have already 100,000, 20% of the Jews have left for the last 20 years in France. So 60%, I was in charge of writing the plan for Aliyah for Israel. So we have something like 60,000 Jews have come to Israel. And today it's a lot of people. So I say 20% have left already. But what happened in France? We have a population with people living on welfare. The Jews, and these people live in this part of places where we have a lot of Muslim, with Muslim neighborhood. We have one family outside around with 100 family of Muslim people. The people they live on social welfare, building like that, which is a social building and so on. And the Jews who live there, we have 70,000 Jews like that. They suffer of anti-Semitism at the daily level, and microaggression even more than that. And they have no place to go. I've been in 25 I made some 25 communities in France, making lectures and calling what happened and so on. And people say, Rabbi Dov, please take us to Israel. I say, you cannot come to Israel. Israel is a capitalist country. It's not a welfare state. 40% of our budget is something for public money. They have almost free renting, and they have a lot of help in many ways in France. And so this population cannot come to Israel. So if we want to make them to come to Israel, I said that to the cabinet of Netanyahu. He asked me what happened, why they don't come. I say, we never have a Aliyah plan without diur, to have without a kind of about living, about renting or a plan for housing. We need a housing element. If we don't have housing solution, we cannot make it in Israel. So this population are waiting, want to come to Israel, but at the moment it's not possible. It's depending of Israel can do. So if we want to save these people, it's a matter of al ta'amod al dam re'acha. Don't stand with people who can be killed at any time. We can even pogrom could happen in France. It's thanks God it didn't happen yet. But if we have a kind of civil war, if, for example, if we had the far right who have victory was of far right, the left side and the Muslim went away. Last year, on June 2023, we had 500 cities in France when the Muslims go out and burn the houses and all the places. It stopped after 5 days, not because of the police. Police was not capable to stop it because of the drug market. They say it's not good. A lot of Muslims work in business, cannabis work in business, and they say it's not good for the business, stop all these riots. But if we understand that it's not one or two places, the police cannot stop them. So in case like that, it will be a danger that could happen anytime in France. It's part of the hard power I spoke before. So there is a threat of riot. If we don't do what you want, we make riot during the Olympic game. We can make riots in all France, so people are already afraid of that, and they don't want to stop that. Do they going to protect the Jews? It's not sure, because the police cannot protect homejacking. They cannot protect what happened with Sarah Halimi. They cannot rape what happened to a 2 year girl a few weeks ago. They cannot protect the Jews at the personal level. And even inside the police, we have 30% of the police people come from the Muslim migrants, and in the army, it's 25% of them were people coming from the Muslim migration. So if you ask these people to attack this neighborhood, it will not be. So we have in every place where we have some Jews. We are surrounded with a lot of Muslims, and we don't know how to protect them. We don't have so much. What would happen in the worst scenario? It's what happened in New Caledonia. Maybe you heard that we have some riots in New Caledonia, in some Micronesia, close to Australia there, and it's a French territory there. What they do is they just go around the surrounding of a neighborhood which is in revolt, in riots. They stop all internet, all telephone, because they won't want young people to organize themselves. And in this case, the Jews who are living in some neighborhood like that, living in a tower in 15th floor, how you can't protect them? It could happen everything. And we know how the Muslims do like that, like in Hebron and like in Gaza regarding the Jews. And we know exactly they do it already for 13 centuries. So we expect they do the same. We expect it will not happen. But if it happens, we don't know who is going to protect the Jews. So that's a matter we have maybe to think of the Jewish people big plan, how to make it save the Jews of France. And for the moment, the strategy of the Jews is denial of France. They just say, no, it's a beaten woman. They have a problem, and they say, no, there is no problem. It's just okay. We have just to decrease your head at the moment, and we come back later on. It will not think. And this is a strategy not to get crazy. But they don't know. We don't have so much solution for them unless the state of Israel and Jews in America come together and make a big plan to help to rescue. It's not only France. It's also Germany, Belgium, and England. Even in England, now we have a very good situation with a good central and respectable prime minister. But we have 10 million people in England who have voted for the far right, for Nigel Farage, and we have also a lot of Muslims. We are very strong organized. They have like AIPAC, they have a Muslim vote, and they is strong very, very much against Israel. And so we can expect that this country could be and they have a veto, and this country could be against Israel. For sure, they want to recognize Palestine state, and they want to have go for BDS, like it happened in the Eurosatory fair 3 weeks ago, to stop 73 Israeli companies. So it's something that could happen. We don't need so much good scenario for Jews in Europe, and we have to be careful, because what we see in Europe, it's what happened in South Africa some 20 years ago. And the Jews today in South Africa live, in small neighborhoods, very close neighborhoods with a lot of protection. and they have protection 24 hours a day, and they live among themselves. It could happen in Europe, and Europe is becoming South Africa, and America is becoming Europe.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I will finish with a very simple thing, a joke, a Jewish joke, to make you smiling, because I'm afraid that I look at you and I see that you are not so happy, and we are very happy. For me personally, I'm very, very happy. I've got a grandson yesterday, and I'm very happy. But still, I have four son-in-law studying in yeshiva, Haredi, and I have 3 sons on the front line. So it's very clear how we live in Israel. It's very simple life, very nice life. I mean, just a lot of we don't sleep so much, but we are very happy, and we know that we part of history. So there is a big history, and so what I can say, that we are part of a big history. The big history, the Jews come back to Zion. That's very simple. The Zion train is coming on the way, like Bob Marley was saying. Yeah, it's very simple. We have a story, and the Jews, if they don't understand pull factors, they will understand push factors. And this is what is going to happen. The history is in the making. We are history in the making, and we're part of that. So it's simple. I invite the Jews to come back home and to come to Israel. Even it's not easy, but better to be if Europe is becoming South Africa, when everyone who has been a soldier in Israel is becoming a criminal, and it's going to happen in France. It could happen next week in France. If the LFI, the far left, is going to be prime minister. It will not now. It could be later. If it will be the far right, it will be, let's say, far right is good for Israel and bad for the Jews, and far left is bad for Israel and bad for the Jews. So we have 2 scenarios. We have to choose. We have no control about that, and we know that nothing good is going to happen, and America is becoming Europe. So we have to think. So I finish with a joke. The joke is the following. We asked Rabbi Josier Zambert, where the Jews are in danger. He said, we have only 2 places in the world where the Jews are in danger: Israel and the diaspora.
That's about right. There's so much to unpack. I want to put a few emphasis on several of your points, because you covered pretty much the entirety. I want to make it clear, my understanding, first of all, to my understanding, the Jewish community in France is the largest outside of the United States and Israel, of course.
Indeed.
Right.
That's the biggest community outside of Jews. That's the biggest community in Europe of Jews, and also the biggest community of Muslims in Europe. So it's.
Oh, ironically, that's quite interesting. And of course, the Jewish community has suffered quite a number of direct attacks against Jews. As you mentioned, the 12-year-old girl who was brutally attacked just a few weeks ago, and even Israeli politician Sharon Haskell's 88-year-old French grandmother was beaten up on the streets. So it was my understanding from some of the other French Israelis that I've spoken with, it was around the time of the second Intifada that they began to look around and understand that perhaps there wasn't really a future in France. And you have spoken about the massive aliyah. And what I want to talk about is this idea of the division. We can go back and define more who is Le Pen's party today and who is the far left. But before we do, let's talk more about this divisions that we also mentioned are manufactured. Everywhere we see France is more divided than ever before. The U.S. is more divided than ever before, and no less in the Jewish communities. And in Israel, October 6th, the community of, people of Israel were more divided than they had ever been before. The division breeds chaos, and chaos is the moment that bad actors, these parasites, come and infest their weakened host. So let's talk about these painful division that was created and really emphasized just in this past election, where there were the community that of more modest means that you mentioned put their hope in Le Pen's party, which of course was traditionally seen as fringe and Nazis before they underwent a very deep refurbishment. And then you had my understanding, the rabbis of the community in France saying, no, of course not. Don't, whatever you do, don't vote right, vote left. And this has created this division. And I think that it's entirely applicable to every diaspora community, because Jews have traditionally been on the left, been in the liberal, the progressive, the human rights, not because we have any desire to see the far out family and God destroying elements that have infested it, but because we understand the wider the lens, the more we all get included in it. Of course, that's obviously been distorted. But let's talk about those divisions and that traditional left-leaning Jewry.
Regarding the question about the division inside the community, what happened in the community? Inside the community, we said before that we have some 80% of the population, of French population, are left behind of globalization. With us, we have a downgrade of our economic level, and we have economic decline, and so on. And we have 20% who have benefited from globalization. And these people are for democracy and the liberal order, because they see globalization and liberal order is good for them, and free market and so on. And the people on the fringe, the 80%, were not anymore fringe, because they are 80% altogether, and there are two parts, the far right and the far left. And this population want social welfare, they want a welfare state. And normally the Jews are part of the 20% who want to be with the Republican backwards. They want to go with the Republican place. But inside the Jews, we have two parts. We have the poor people and the wealthy people. The wealthy people, they go for, and this is the institution. The Jewish institution in France is three parts. One is a political one, CRIF. One is a religious one, consistoire, and one is a social one, which is FSGU. It's three heads. And this group people, they go with the power in place. Normally, the Jews always go with who is on the kingdom. This is the basic in all historical situation. In all historical situation, the Jews are close to the power, because they know who is going to protect them as the power in place. And then we may have a change in that. So the Jews go for Republican and democracy, and not for the far right and not for the far left. But inside the Jews who live in neighborhood with a lot of hostile population, with a lot of Muslim population around, they want to be protected. They prefer to have less freedom and more protection. They go for the far right. They want to stop Islam, so they go for far right. And we have last week on Wednesday, we had 30 leaders of communities who have met with Marine Le Pen, with the far right, for the first time. And it was not allowed by the central institution. The central institution is people who live in the good neighborhood, protected neighborhood, safe neighborhood, and wealthy people. And that the 30 leaders of Jewish community live on the suburbs, and they know they need to be protected. So they met with Marine Le Pen, asking her, how you are going to deal with us? How you are going to protect us? Are you going to forbid and ban kosher food? Are you going to allow us to have a kippah? Are you going to allow us to go not go to school on Shabbat and so on? So they asked her, and she said, yes, we are going to protect you, and we are doing that. So these people are understanding that there is a risk, and it's not for the Jews as a whole. It's not. We have to be ready for all scenarios, even for scenarios of far left and scenarios of far right. Some Jews has to be close to every party, everything. It's very important for Jews. We never know what could happen. Normally, what happened in history, when you have the power, the Jewish institution go with the power which is at the moment ruling the country. And when we have a change, a shift in the kingdom, and so this you go, and we have new elite who come, because it's cannot. You have to be very loyal to the kingdom. This is what the Jews, the Kurd Jews who make, the Jews who are the leaders of community. They go with a power which is ruling at the moment. And so for sure, these people don't want to have the far right, against the far right. But the people on the field say, you cannot make a persona non grata to Marine Le Pen on your Jewish radio, on Jewish media, because maybe it's going to be the leaders tomorrow. And for sure, what is going to happen now, the likely scenario for France is we have to have a far left government now. The far left will have, as I said, to recognize Palestine, and then will do BDS, and will accuse Israel of committing crime against humanity, and they will maybe criminalize all the children who have been in the army in Israel and so on. And then, but after 2 years of really balagan, to something, it will be very bad, because if we have to have such a coalition, France is a very big problem of money. He has a deficit with a 5% deficit. Is really getting crazy with that. But we understand, if we make a large coalition, you have to give a lot of money to all these people to be in your coalition, because they don't have the same program. The Muslims want a lot of money for mosque and so on. The Green Party want a lot of money for ecology and so on. They want to have a lot of money for that. So it's going to be a very expensive government. So it will be worse and worse. When France could be really in very bad shape on the economic side. And so in 2 years from now, we have a presidential election in May 2027. And normally with a lot of violence, because the far left ask that the policemen will not have any gun. They don't have a gun. They want to increase the immigration. And we have 500,000 migrants every year, and they want to increase the population to give them French nationality, because it's also their people who vote for them. So it's very simple. They want a lot of more voters from the left. And we call it left, but it's Islam and left together. So this population, they want to have a post-national country, multicultural country. They want to make a France like Algeria or something like that. And so it will be a very bad shape. And the French natives who vote for the far right will be very, very angry. If they don't go for riots and to take, hunter guns and go to fight in the civil war, they will wait for May 2027. At this time, for sure, we are mainly sure now that Marine Le Pen and the far right will take over, and they will do something. We don't know what they can do, because as you may understand, the Muslims are not going to evaporate. The Muslims are not going to go back to Algeria. They prefer to have the welfare state of France than to go back to country you have no freedom. Even for Muslim brothers are not allowed in most of the countries, Muslim countries, because they know who they are. They can go with a mask, but in France they can go with a mask and nobody knows, because they go with a suit and underneath. But in Muslim country they know who are the Muslim brothers, what they want to do, like I have done in Algeria, with 2,100 people killed and so on. And we know what happened in other countries. Political Islam is really a disaster. So in France, they have not been in this scenario. So maybe it could happen. And it's a disaster for the Jews, for sure. So I'm very happy to tell you that we are in very good shape. We are everything is going good. From the divine plan is going very well. And if we understand better history, maybe we can go better, and to anticipate the future, to understand the scenarios, not only in Europe, but also in America.
Well, I actually agree with you. There's just a few more questions, if I can. I think that, what you stated, it's so clear and I don't know why our world leaders, even with all the lack of transparency, why they don't just put an emphasis and say, we are fighting Iran, we are fighting Russia, we are fighting China. These are the massive, trunks, and these are the branches around it. It would be such a simple and direct way to get the vast majority of people who really want to live their lives fairly simply and move on with things, to get everybody on board. Let me ask you your opinion. Can the Jews feel safe with Marine Le Pen? Do you think that have they really genuinely changed? Yeah.
I will make a remark about it. We have a change between the elite, with the leadership, and with the masses. The masses of far right are anti-Semitic, but it was something like, it was The real French, which is a far-right anti-Semitic French, is something like 10%. But today they have three more people. It's about 30% of the vote. So we have 20%, 20% of the French who are not anti-Semitic. So at the leadership level, they change their mind and they say, they understood that if we want to be kosher, the Jews have a lot of symbolic power. It's because we look at the Jews like a canary in the coal mine, and we people know that if you have to do something to show that you are a real Democrat, you have to look at the Jews and to be accepted by the Jews. So they make a lot of effort. The reason they come back about what they said about kosher food and about other things to be accepted by the Jews, but they didn't succeed to convince all the French they have changed. Because as you've seen, they didn't yet been accepted. And what they have done in the last weeks, the masses inside the representative of the local level of the far right, we have also a lot of people who have a Nazi and a neo-Nazi background and so on, who have been the leaders and they didn't make the change. When Marine Le Pen for 20 years had changed, he understood if he wants to be president, he has to change her DNA. They have to change and to go out of anti-Semitism. She's not anti-Semite, and she's not, and they are pro-Israel because they are for nationalist state, and they understand that Israel, it's very simple. It's somebody come to your house and make a lot of problem in your house. Israel is going back and destroying everywhere, everything that people have destroyed, and they go back, and not only, revenge is not only to give back a proportional violence, but a real to destroy all the country people who have attacked you. This is the regular deterrence that we know in the world, and especially in the Middle East. If somebody is attacking you, you have to go back and give him a lot of violence to that. Next time he'll be afraid to go back to attack you. And they understand that, and especially they know the Muslim very well. They have been put out from Algeria, the France, so they know how the Muslim think. And so at the moment, we cannot trust how it will happen with Marine Le Pen. From what we know from the far right today, they will protect the Jews for a few months, maybe a few years. On the long term, it could be like in Orban in Hungary. I mean, it will be a totalitarian. It will be not good to be LGBT, not good to be a Muslim, not good to be a Jew. You have to decrease your Jewish profile, privatization of your Jewish identity. But Jews in Hungary, they feel free. I mean, you have to don't make too much noise. Don't say that you are against the power, and you can have a safe life. Satmar Hasidim and other Hasidim in Hungary live a good life. I mean, they are protected at least on the physical level. But it's not America. It's not a democracy, maybe, but at least the Jews prefer to be protected and a strong power, but to be a kind of anarchy with a lot of violence. So for Jews, it could live. This is one solution. What we can expect that will happen in France, the Jews will go back to some neighborhood like in South Africa. They will live like in Brazil or like in South Africa or Mexico. They live in some closed residential neighborhood with very protected. And they will live there. I mean, if you look at a matter of dignity, or if you want to be part of a larger history and not only to have your own business like an advocate or a doctor or dentist or something, like if you want to be part of a big history, if you want to have a full Jewish life, you can come to Israel and pay the price for that. If you don't want to pay the price, I understand that, I respect that, and you're just to have a Jewish private life, you can live in country like Hungary. And we have also people thinking about going to there. I mean, I've seen plans for Jews who want to go to Portugal, to go to Czech Republic, or even to Poland, go back to Krakow. Wow. Invite you to go back to Krakow. It's very close to Auschwitz. It's very, very, very. It could be a very, very good life. I mean, go back to Poland, and it could be a solution for the Jews for a while. And so, yeah, I mean, we cannot trust Marine Le Pen on the long term. We can trust her on the short term because for the moment she has to show that she's kosher. Later on, we'll see that the people who are working with her as people who are very problematic past. And we cannot change that because it's part of the nationalism. When you go to nationalism, you have for xenophobia. They hate the Muslim much more than the Jews. like in Holland with Geert Wilders, but normally they don't support. I just say they don't like so much the Jews. They want to be French to the French, but but they can support Israel. They can be pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, and this is something that could happen.
If I could, just two more questions. And on one hand, it's such a logical thing that even far right people who don't like Jews, why wouldn't they want to support Israel? Because here's where you can put all the Jews and you can keep us there. I have two more questions. One is really, you mentioned already the direction that also Belgium is going. Is there, but we see also in the Netherlands a very strong PM who's speaking out against unbridled immigration. Netherlands couldn't be able to fight this alone. Does it have more support in this trajectory of trying to keep the original people in their countries? Is it just the Netherlands against who's next? Of course, we know Germany, we know Belgium is going the way of France. Where does that balance hold?
Yeah, the story is the same with the left behind of globalization and immigration in all Western Europe, continental Europe, and in England too. So the story is the same story. Let's say that what they have, why they support Israel, because they see Israel as a backlash against Islamism. That's very simple. So they see they have a common front against Islamization. So right. They see Israel as part of a fight. And for sure, they prefer the Jews go back to Israel than to remain in France or in Holland or in Germany. So go back to Palestine. So it's something that could happen this way too. And it can work this way. So they support Israel and they can support Israel. But there was not, 20 years ago, the far right in France was not pro-Israel, was pro-Saddam Hussein, pro-Iran and so on. And for sure today they are pro-Putin. So if they are pro-Putin and Putin is going with Iran, so they are on the axis of evil, like China, Iran and so on, we cannot trust them also on the foreign affairs model. But at the moment in France, when you have to choose between one evil and one the other, the far right could be better for the local Jews. At least they will be protected. It will be totalitarian and maybe a backlash against Islam. Thank you very much, Ilana. I'm happy to be part of your guest, and good luck for all what you do. And and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Maimon. We'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.